Ay, sa Mau, tawag ito. Hey, welcome to Philippines.
How you doing?
How are you?
Good, good. You?
Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah. Drink. You drink, Redors?
That's a museum.
You drink a beer. Hey.
Beautiful that.
So, because there was a tradition of earlier practice, similar to many ancient cultures, that when we die, we believe that these materials will represent our wealth in the afterlife. So, we believe that when we die, we should be buried with them.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's why they are basically in whole pieces. No? So, and then they came mainly from China, but this one, it came from Vietnam. So you would see the irony that before, in the absence of modern engines, no? Turbine engines.
So what year are these from?
So these could range from as far as at least the Qing dynasty, which is Qing dynasty being around 1640.
Now what's going on here in the Philippines back then?
1644. We were the Spanish colony.
That's after Magellan, right?
Yeah, after Magellan. But trading have been going on since as far as the 1960, the Song dynasty, and even earlier. So we have been in contact with other countries already.
Okay.
So these are just remnants of burial goods, of how part of the burial practice. But this one, basically, if you look at here, this is actually, if you see them being broken fragments, we're actually looking at a historical garbage.
Really?
So this was the garbage of the time.
Okay, well that's how they discover what's going on, right?
Yeah.
By looking at the garbage.
Yeah, you would know from the remains that what they were doing. So they had local pottery. To some would call them as pottery of Kalanai tradition. So the Kalanai tradition pottery could trace its roots to as far back as
Now we're in the BC.
Cham people.
BC, is it?
Yeah.
500 BC. Well, I see where it goes in time here.
So these are
the oldest.
obsidian. Yeah, could go as far as the Neolithic era. So they were used as a slicing tool because those were the sharpest at the time. They don't know steel, how to process steel yet. So,
Okay.
Yeah. So then this one is actually iron. This is a trade item from Ming Dynasty, China.
What's this one here?
It's an iron harpoon.
Now that's the first iron.
Yeah, one of the early. Yeah.
1300. Wow. Okay, then we're moving further here.
Further here, and then we get to know a little bit about their diet. So this is one of their protein source of protein, wild boar and deer.
Okay.
Yeah, but actually, so we only had access to these in other museums, which actually have materials of the same archaeological site. What they have is shellfish, a lot of shellfish.
Okay.
And
you
then
haven't found any shellfish here?
So we're hoping to get some and then include them here to complete the
they haven't found
the
any.
diet.
So
Yeah.
how old? I mean, we're in CDO right now, right? So
Yeah. So the community basing on one material. It is from a woman. Basing from the skull, it's about in her mid-30s. She was dated to 350 AD. That's 3rd century.
Okay.
Yeah. So she was already 35 years old. So because of, I think that's the only one that's empirical. So we can say that
that's the oldest person you found.
That's the oldest person we found so far.
So far.
So that's
So this really is not that old compared to other parts of the Philippines.
1,600. Yeah.
I know other parts of the Philippines even older, right?
Yeah. But if we can trace their roots, that woman's grandparents or some sort, that we probably could have gone further. And then Cagayan is actually related to Cebu.
Okay.
Cebu, the Cebu people. Cebu and Cebu, Butuan as well. Butuan being one of the known gold traders
Okay.
during the period.
We're gonna move over here. What we got here?
So these are tools that actually, these are traditional tools in acquiring gold from the river.
Oh, to catch the gold. Okay, so now we're up in the Spanish.
Actually, well, yes, the Spanish took a lot of gold.
Is it the Filipinos, were they into the gold before the Spanish got here?
Well, according to interviews with the elders, they would tell us that once upon a time, gold didn't have much value with the early Filipinos because they were common.
Oh, so it was here, but they didn't
imagine
think nothing of it.
Waking up,
Had no value.
You just see them everywhere and wherever. Yeah.
Right.
Actually, children would just use them as chewing gum. They would just chew them when they're bored because they're soft.
Wow, that's probably not too good for their teeth.
So when the Chinese came, bringing with them their glazed porcelain, so basing on the oldest trade item was from the 1960s, 9th century. So it was during the time that maybe the gold might have already have value, because the natives can only produce this kind of pottery. But what they could
around 960 it started having value,
Yeah.
so that's before the Spanish even got.
Yeah, and then when glazed porcelain was introduced, so since the natives don't know how to glaze, how to do glazing in their porcelain, so it might have been very valuable, especially with design. So they bartered gold for glazed ceramics.
Now was that with the Chinese?
Because the Chinese were actually the first people who were known for their glazed porcelain, early people. So and then the Chinese was like, we want gold. So
okay, so once the Chinese wanted the gold,
then
then they had something to trade with.
Yeah.
Okay, then what's this here?
It's actually one of the musical instrument. You only had 2 strings. Actually, we're planning to replicate it, to have a modern version of it, so that we will have a better understanding.
Now, what year is that from?
This one I would believe, is quite recent already. Probably in the 1980s, 1970s.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So although it's still up for the origin for that instrument is still up for debate. It could go as far as go from maybe India somewhere.
What's a giant clam?
Giant clam. So because there have been
So that's already fossilized. So that means they were here long before that, right? Eating that clam.
It could go to about at least 160,000 years, at least.
Okay, now we're getting back.
Yeah. So because these were found actually in the upriver. And then the characteristics of the giant clam is that by the time that they grow, they don't move compared to other clams,
Okay, now is there signs that they ate this clam? Or was that just the one that would happen to be here? Or are there signs that people were actually eating it back then? 160,000 years ago.
Well, not because the problem is it's quite common. So it's too heavy. It's too heavy for people to bring them way up there.
Okay.
So and then they're found in the upland. So it would be impractical. You would prefer to either eat it on site and then leave it rather than carry the whole shell. So
but there were people here eating clam
at
that time.
Actually,
right?
shellfish was one of the main source of protein. Actually, particularly among coastal natives. So we see a lot of in archaeological sites along the sea area, along the shore. They used to have a lot of, like, part of their garbage site, the midden site had a lot of shellfish in them.
Okay, so now they were eating probably the shellfish before they were eating the boar, huh?
Yeah, so the boar is more of a specialty.
Yeah,
usually they
like today, right?
Yeah. So meaning the lowland people, they ate a lot of shellfish, but if they're able to gather enough salt, they would trade them with the upland people, which would bring them
like the Negritos up in the mountains.
Or not really, not just Negritos, but other Malay
And they
They
lived
call
in the
Indo-Malay
mountains.
group, yeah, something like that.
So different people lived in the mountains, different people lived by the sea,
Yeah,
but they
yeah.
traded with each other.
They traded each other.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, so the people in the mountains, like, I could use a little bit of salt in my food, so I would bring this half of the deer going down, and then I'll trade it with fish and
So
salt.
the mountain people would bring the deer, and the people here would
Bring
get
the salt going
salt and the seafood.
Yeah, seafood going up.
That's a good. They had it good back then.
Because if you're interested, if you get to develop an interest in local food, usually people who are who are maritime people tend to prefer less salt in their food
Okay.
because the air is salty
It's
already.
like the fishermen.
Yeah, it's usually fisher folk. But then if you go to Bukidnon and hinterland communities, they prefer a lot lot in their food. Yeah.
Wow, I never knew that. That's good
Yeah,
to
because
know.
I was able to visit Tawi-Tawi.
Right.
Yeah, Tawi-Tawi, and then I noticed in Tawi-Tawi, usually their food tasted a little bit bland because
salt. Yeah.
a lot, just very
I
little
heard that
salt.
too.
Yeah,
I heard that.
Yeah, but in Bukidnon, I was like, oh, this is very very salty.
Salty.
Yeah. So one of the common ailments in Bukidnon is kidney problems.
Right. Too
Yeah.
much salt. Probably bad for your heart too.
Yeah,
too much
yeah.
salt. Wow. So what else do we have here in the museum?
Well, this is just the ground floor, and then we could move upstairs.
Okay. Let's go take a look upstairs.
So we have a little bit of the Spanish era, and some of the artifacts of the time. So basically, if I were to add more on these coral blocks, so they actually came from China.
The coral blocks
Coral blocks. So
came from China.
Rather, just broken pieces of coral, fossilized sponges from mountains in
So they
Fuji.
shipped it all the way here from China?
They ship it out because they were actually used as ballasts for their trading vessels. So when they arrived in the different parts of the Philippines, they would unload all of these stones, and then they would be replaced with trade items.
All right. And the
So
Filipinos
we
use them
had,
to build.
so for maybe about hundreds or even thousands of years, we've had boulders and boulders of coral blocks in the islands. And then when the Spaniards came, they noticed that they're actually more durable than the type of stone or limestone that they have in their.
So the Spaniards used them too.
So they taught the natives that this is how you make blocks out of them.
Oh.
And then we built churches out of them and forts and
Spanish taught them how to do it.
Yeah. And then there's actually one fort in Florida, I think. Florida, yeah. They call it the Fuerza de San Agustin in Florida.
I'm from Florida.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I've been to St. Augustine, yeah.
And that's the fort
oldest
that.
city in the United States.
So the fort Saint Augustine was actually had two names. The Ghost Fort, when the British was still bombarding it for several days, because it doesn't seem to topple down. And then by the time that the Spaniards surrendered, and then the British took over the fort, they noticed that the fort had a lot of holes in them, and so but it didn't collapse. So it's something to do with the material.
How strong.
Yeah,
Wow.
because
I
it
never
was
knew that.
spongy. So the material that was used in that fort came from here or China.
Really?
Yeah.
And they did the same thing. They used it for ballast.
Yeah.
Brought it over and then unloaded it.
Rather, when the Spaniards noticed the durability of this material, they shipped them to Florida.
Okay.
And built a fort there.
Oh, so they really shipped it here. It wasn't
Yeah.
just ballast. They shipped it here like a cargo.
So I think with the time that the British and the Spanish were already at odds with each other, so there's a port here, then the British will come here, so we better build a really good one, good fort. But eventually the British won because they bombarded them at night. So the
Okay.
Spanish couldn't sleep, and then they just surrendered because we could not sleep anymore.
Gotcha. Okay, let's go see what we have up here.
Yeah, so the Philippine-American War happened after when the Spaniards surrendered to during the Spanish War. Yeah, and then so because of the part of the treaty between Spain and the United States was for Spain to secede all of its territories in South America, but they wanted to put a price on the Philippines and Guam, I think, $20 million.
Cheap, huh? Wow.
Yeah.
Unbelievable what happened in the past.
Yeah. So actually, what happened was because after these first few years when the Americans came here and then fought the natives, what happened in the mainland is that they were actually protesting because they were wondering as to why spend so much arsenal on if you call it primitive people,
Right.
why spend so much money on guns and bombs? So they were questioning what the Americans were doing here, what Commodore Dewey was doing here. So when they realized there were a lot of atrocities that were going on, they started to pressure the I think Congress or the government, and then it shifted. So what happened later on was that the U.S. government brought free education, healthcare, and infrastructure. So the building, the water tower where we are now, is actually a product of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's in the 1900s?
So this was it started around, I think it went around about 1905, 1903, then towards, because our Plaza Divisoria, if you're able to find Plaza Divisoria, it was during the American period, when they noticed that the town had problems with fire breaking out. They decided to develop a divider, a fire breach.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's why you have the Divisoria. So because of the education, healthcare, so we actually developed a friendship between between the Americans, and then we were supposed to be the Americans were supposed to award the Philippines their full independence in 1942. We were attacked by Japan.
They delayed it.
Yeah, it got delayed. So we continue. What the Japanese did actually, as early as in the 1930s, there were a lot of Japanese merchants that were migrating. Well, not just in the Philippines, but in other places as well. Many of the Japanese were interested in farming bananas and hemp, abaca hemp.
So the Japanese wanted the resources.
Yeah, they wanted to develop the resources. And others, they were selling. They had these Japanese bazaars. Yeah, they were selling. So when Imperial Japan, joined the Axis powers with Adolf Hitler, they decided to use the Japanese merchants that were settling in the country, in other places, to find or detect important personalities, politicians, chief of police, military generals, and military camps. So it would be easier for them to overtake the entire.
Okay. Now didn't the Filipinos rebel though?
Well, at first, when they did their own blitzkrieg in the Philippines, it happened actually a day after Pearl Harbor. So Pearl Harbor was bombed in December 7, 1941, and then December 8 they bombed Manila and then the rest of the country.
Oh.
So then the city was already under Japanese control overnight.
So they took over, but first they got politicians and everything on their side, and they blitzkrieg. Okay.
Yeah. And then that's how it started. And then General MacArthur was then ordered to retreat, and then during the Battle of Bataan, and then from Corregidor he he took a small boat, a patrol torpedo boat, landed in our pier, Makabalan Pier.
Right here, right?
Yeah. And then they had a convoy going to Bukidnon in Manolo Fortish in the Del Monte plantation. Yeah. And then he flew to Australia after that. When he landed in Australia, he said his famous line, "I shall return." But what happened after that is actually the United States Army of the Far East was decommissioned. So now the Filipinos were told that we cannot support you right now. We're preparing for an overall counterattack. If you want to surrender, you can actually surrender to the Japanese and wait for us to come back. But the thing is, many of the Filipino combatants didn't want to surrender, so they continued on fighting. So a typical guerrilla fighter would be carrying these. So since they don't have like a military issue backpacks or other, so they would use blankets, military blanket if they're fortunate. If not, any blanket will do. It will become their sleeping blanket and their sling bag.
Okay, they use this for everything.
Yeah, sling bag.
And they had helmets too?
Helmets. Well, because the guerrillas were continued fighting, they didn't surrender. So the MacArthur, General MacArthur, and the Southwestern and then South Pacific Command had a small how do you call this? They launched 2 submarines carrying supplies, and they landed in.
So they gave them a little bit of supplies.
A little bit of supplies. So those who were able to who were fortunate to get their hands on an M1 steel pot helmet, well and good. But for the rest.
Now, what about those canteens?
Yeah, this one is from a Japanese soldier. So if they
killed the soldier,
they managed to yeah,
very resourceful.
Yeah, to get one, then well and good. They have a water bottle. If not, they will make use of a coconut shell.
Okay, right.
Yeah. So if they couldn't find a helmet, and any piece of cloth will do, just to keep their hair away from their face and the sun.
Back then they had long hair, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, you still have long hair?
Long hair because they had no time for.
Oh, okay.
So might as well just keep the hair away. And then since many of them are devout Christians, they would wear with them crosses.
Okay.
Maybe God will protect me today.
Right.
And then their primary weapon is not the gun but the bolo.
Okay.
Because they have to wait for the ultimate opportunity to finally use their guns. If they can engage their enemies, with the use of primitive weapons, and then
you don't have to reload.
Yeah, you have to reload. You have unlimited ammo, which the Japanese actually didn't like. The Japanese didn't like, or at times they were actually afraid of.
So this right here, this is
what we call the barefoot army. Barefoot army because they value their boots more.
No, that's right here in CDL. This picture.
Yeah, CDO. Yeah. So we're not particularly sure as to which part in CDO.
Oh, you don't know. You don't recognize it.
Yeah, because this came from the National Archives in the US, and then they only say it's somewhere in Cagayan de Oro. So we don't know which part. Maybe it could be in Ipunan area, or maybe in Bugo area, somewhere there. But we're thinking that this could be like Ipunan area.
Okay. You don't get much to work with in that picture, huh?
Yeah, but what you can say is that barefooted, some of them topless. So
barefoot army.
Yeah, barefoot army because they value their boots more. They say because an injured boot can heal, or an injured boot cannot be fixed.
Right.
But an injured feet can heal.
Right.
And then they run faster actually in bare feet.
Well, here's where we are, huh?
Yeah, that's the water tower. So this is maybe the only or one of the very few buildings that were spared in the course of World War II. The Japanese.
Okay.
So
Education.
Yeah. So it's actually Spanish colonial houses were more Filipino, were more native and Chinese than the Americans. So the foundations of the colonial house is native Filipino, what we call the Bahay Kubo in Tagalog, and then the Spaniards just added the rooms, and then the Chinese added the
So it's
core.
a mix of everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. So because you cannot find this architecture in Spain.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You can find some similarities in China, but not the entire thing. So our schools, when the Americans introduced made schools more available, one like a senator, congressman, I think a governor from Nueva Ecija, Rosauro Gabaldon, he developed this law that every community school has to be available. So there should be a school in every municipality.
Right.
So it was called the
And
Gabaldon
when
Law.
was that?
Yeah.
When did that happen?
This was around 1918, 1916. Yeah. So it was passed, and then they had an American engineer develop the design, and then the design is inspired from Spanish colonial architecture with large windows, a lot of natural lighting, elevated to the second floor. So that's why we call them now as the Gabaldon school buildings.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So in every if you chance, like for example Camiguin, you could look for the old elementary school, and then you would see a Gabaldon building.
Okay.
You know.
Wow.
Actually, we have a couple in the city, a couple of those school buildings.
Really?
Actually, several. There were actually several.
You can go visit them.
Yeah, if you could, look for the principal, they could show you the Gabaldon.
Wow, incredible tour. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
And what's your name?
JC, by the way. Yeah.
Okay, it's been great visiting, and I'm sure people are gonna love to come see you here.
Yeah. So a lot of students come here.
They come here, the students,
Yeah.
they bring the whole class.
Yeah, the whole class come here.
Well, here you have it, the Butter Tower Museum,
Entire museum.
Cagayan de Oro.
The only source of water in the
Oh,
town.
so they spared it on purpose.
Yeah.
Right. Wow.
So that's why we get to enjoy it.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So upstairs is not quite finished, but we have some displays if we want to.
We'll go take a look
Yeah.
upstairs.
So these are like portraits of past elected mayors of the city.
Oh, these are recent, huh?
Yeah. Recent history.
Not as exciting as the old stuff, huh?
Well, to many locals, they find this just as exciting because they can relate to it. They
Okay.
say, "Oh, my mother used to shake hands with this mayor."
Oh, okay. Wow.
So way up there, on top of those pipes, are the holding tank of the water tower.
Oh, okay, so the holding tanks are on top
Yeah.
of this? And so what was in here?
This is just the legs.
And that's it, you also use that for the gravity to push.
Yeah. So it's basically, it functions like your typical, water reservoir in the towns. You have that tank on top, and then you have the legs. But because because iron was expensive at the time, they could not do the usual design. Like the spider legs, and you have the head on top. The concrete was cheaper and more accessible because they can actually source the materials on site. So that's why the design is like a lighthouse or something, or a tower.
It's amazing. I'd like to live here.
Yeah.
It'd be an awesome condominium, huh?
Yeah. So that's why this is the design. Actually, this is like this is templated. Yeah. So meaning you have like your chief architect from Manila. And it's like, okay, so since iron is expensive, so I'll develop the design using only concrete and then some iron, and then this will be the design.
No, what about this floor here? Was that added later?
This is recent. Yeah, this is recent, 2008. But the mayor at the time, this is Constantino Haraula, he had very specific instructions with the engineer that this building, what we're standing now, should be a separate building. It has its own foundation.
Okay.
So it's not supposed to rely on the old building.
Okay, so it's going to stand the test of time.
Yeah. So meaning if somebody drops like their bottle of water here, the water would seep through the ground floor. It's not attached to the old building.
Okay, wow, this is incredible. So glad I made it over to see it.
Actually, what I would be interested in acquiring for the museum is a fuel can from the Soconi motor gasoline. If I see Soconi motor gasoline.
Man, look at that.
Socon, Socony, motor, then gasoline.
Wow.
So, because but today I think Socony motor gasoline, if I'm not mistaken, today is like Mobil engine oils. Yeah. So because at the time in the 1920s, there were no refueling stations yet. You buy fuel by the can.
Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So, well, at least in here. So you tend to buy because I think there were only very few cars in the town at the time. So meaning in the 1920s, I think there was only about 1 or 2 families that had cars
Really?
at the time. Very few people.
The rich people. Huh?
Yeah. So there were a lot of fuel cans that were lying around. So they decided to use it as the interior mold of the structure. So the standard sheet iron mold is outside so that it'll be smooth. But since they didn't think that this will become a museum in the near future, so they used only spent fuel cans.
And that's the actual fuel can, huh?
Well, no, it's actually just the mold. They
It's
just
a mold,
stick it
okay.
together, yeah. And then they pour the concrete in the middle.
Oh, they use it for the mold.
So they took it out.
Right.
So that's why you
gotcha.
have this indentation.
I got you. Wow, that's incredible.
So Socony motor gasoline. I think they're quite rare now. I think they're about $160.
So you got to get one of those to get in here.
Yeah, if I could, it would be very interesting if we could find one. I think lying around today, in some old garage.
Right, I'm sure somebody has one somewhere. Everybody loves to save stuff here.
Yeah.
They don't want to part with it though.
Yeah.
They want 1 million pesos.
Oh, 160. I think that's about like maybe 10,000.
10,000. They all think it's worth more though if they have one.
Yeah. Socony motor gasoline.
Wow.
And then this one I think is from another mold.
Oh yeah. Look at
But this one is for the ceiling. You know, it's just for. I think this used to be used for for aesthetic purposes in houses. You know, and then judging by how the mold turned out, maybe this could be spent already. And just
wow,
repurposed.
they made a whole mold out of that and then poured that concrete.
Well, basing on, you have these lines here. So meaning they did this,
Okay, sections.
yeah.
You're right there
Yeah,
too.
they went up,
Yeah.
yeah.
See it every 6 feet or so.
Yeah.
Wow. It's incredible.
So you have all of these pipes. This is cast iron, made in the U.S.
Really?
So the initial budget for this building, for the water system, is about 30,000 pesos. It's about 13 million in this currency at this time. But when it was finished, I think it went over budget to almost 20,000. So by the time that the construction was finished, it was already about 50,000 pesos.
That's normal to go over budget.
So we were wondering as to what could have been the reason.
Politicians.
Well, actually I'll show you about. This is from the Western Auto Company, 1948. It's a tabletop radio, true tone tabletop radio. So Western Auto Company used to make radios for cars. So when you get your car, it doesn't have a radio yet, so you have to have the company to install. Yeah. So then they had this version, which is you can just bring it in
Tabletop.
The home. Yeah, tabletop.
Now what about this one?
This one is Randix. It's a Randix collector's edition. It's already in the 1980s.
Really?
So if you want to have that like a classical feel, so you would buy the collector's edition, which is from plywood veneers already, cathedral type. Yeah.
In the 80s, and this one here?
This one is from the 70s, Constellation. That's actually the favorite of many Filipino farmers of the time.
Okay.
Because when they go, because it's a transistor radio with an antenna. So during about early part in the morning, like as early as maybe 8:30, 9 o'clock, they would bring out their radios and they would hang it on a tree branch when they were doing their work in the
Really?
forest.
Wow.
up until the signal goes out.
I wonder if there's still some Filipinos doing that today out in the country.
It's maybe in some even more remote areas, because I'm working in an indigenous community. From some time I've been experiencing that every 9 o'clock, and then the old man would bring out his
It's a tradition.
radio, and everybody listens to whatever is in the air.
I
music.
believe that.
But today, I think the internet is entering the community. So you can pay 1 peso.
Even in the
pesos.
province, huh?
Yeah, internet is coming in.
Wow. Time never stops.
Yeah.
Never stops for anyone.
So maybe this is the reason as to the additional budget. So if you could see the mountain range behind the tree, about that, if you could, that area is there's a large spring there. So, and then they have that's where
Is that fruit right there on the tree?
Yeah, those are chicos. Those are chicos even there. Those are chico trees. Yeah, I'm not sure if the neighbor would allow us to
That's
get
the neighbor.
So I think so meaning the source of the water of this tower came from that mountain over there.
Okay, the spring.
Yeah, the spring.
And it comes all the way to here.
Yeah. So I think that might have been the cause of the
Oh, okay. Okay.
budget. So because iron pipes were expensive.
Right.
So
they had to pipe it all the way from the spring.
Yeah. So because I believe the usual idea was to get the water from the ground, but because there was a history of a cholera outbreak as early as 1916. So I think that's the idea, that they had to change it from groundwater to spring water.
Okay.
So
That makes more sense
They had to
anyway.
buy more pipes.
Tastier, I think, the spring water.
So the water tower is the holding tank can actually hold up to 198 cubic meters. It's about 50,000 gallons, if I'm not mistaken, supplying up to 3,000 households.
3,000 households. So it's just everybody in this immediate area, really.
Yeah,
huh?
in the area. So there are about 16 fire hydrants in the area. So the fire hydrants functions like a common.
So they use the water for
communal,
fires too.
Fires too as well.
And drinking.
Yeah, drinking and yeah.
Wow.
So meaning if they put out fires using spring water.
Wow, I bet they're hoping there's no fire. They don't want to waste their water.
Yeah. So yeah. Yeah, so this is like the uniform of the Philippine Republican Army. So you would know it's the pockets are different than the usual pockets that we have now.
Sideways.
Yeah, sideways. So it's easy to put the letters in.
Oh.
Instead of having the trouble of arching your wrists. So.
Wow, incredible.
So, actually, there was actually an opportunity that we could have won against the Americans during the Philippine War, but it only took a piece of letter to to decide the fate of the Filipinos at the time.
He looks familiar.
That's Apolinar Velez. He's one of the known philanthropists in the city. That's General Nicolas Capistrano. Capistrano Street. Yeah, that's him. He's from Bulacan. And then that is Apolinar Velez, by the way. That's Velez Street. And then this is the Capitan Chano. Roa. Vicente Roa, sorry. Vicente Roa. So most of the military forces in the Philippines during the Philippine War were macheteros. So
Okay.
their only weapon is this long blade there.
That's it.
And then,
Deadly though. Even though I'm a Filipino coming up there behind you with that, pull out your gun, it's too late.
yeah, because it's the
So that's the
45 Filomeno Bautista. Filomeno Bautista is actually the one who was able to write the history of the city.
Okay.
Yeah, because he was actually a teacher in the 1920s, and then he wanted to interview the veterans of the Philippine War, especially Vicente Roa, because he served during the Spanish period as well. He was a voluntario. So he compiled a lot of these letters and a lot of these interviews firsthand. So in 1939, he was able to roughly finish his manuscript. And then he was thinking of trying to do some refining before publishing it. Then World War II happened, and the manuscript almost got lost.
Really?
So if you could imagine if it fell on some rice field and got
Wow.
destroyed, you wouldn't know all of these.
You wouldn't even know that either. Wow, incredible.
Yeah. Yes. This is actually a failed surprise attack, because the Filipinos they had the plan. They know that they're outgunned, but they had an opportunity to retake the town if they attack early in the morning, like 4 o'clock in the morning, while the enemy was sleeping. But the problem is, most of the native, the Cagayanons, they don't understand the concept of a silent charge, because by tradition, when you go to war, you have to declare. So by the time that they started killing these American sentries, American guards, somehow they felt the
scream.
Yeah. then the Americans awoke, and then because they were well trained, quick response, and then there were about 7 to 3 casualties of the Cagayanon side.
Wow.
Yeah, so they had to retreat. So then this is the second battle of Agusan. I think the Cagayanons didn't realize that Agusan Hill is near the shore. So since near the shore, so the Americans had the naval advantage. So they were heavily bombarded by the ship. So Vicente Roa was martyred because in order to protect the retreat of General Capistrano, he had to stay. He had to slow down the enemy. Yeah, the commemoration last year 2000 stamp collection.
Wow, it's an incredible museum. Thank you very much. I appreciate the tour. It's so much better tour. I thought I was just going to be coming in here to film, but it's just like, wow, you're really good at your job.
Thank you very much. I had to update myself from time to time.
Well, that's good. You always stay updated, with anything.
Yeah, so those are some of the cast iron pipes we dug out. So this is actually the drain pipe. And this is actually, I think this was an attempt to have like a groundwater. This is heavy. It took about 8 people to carry this.
Wow.
This is the
Can actually touch the history. Wow.
It's cast iron, galvanized cast iron.
It's still here, right? A little bit of wear, but it's still going. Wow.
So this is Spanish period. Actually, the Americans at the time were very particular in erasing remnants of Spanish imperialism. But actually, they realized that the architecture that developed during the Spanish colonization is actually more native than Spanish.
Okay.
Well, rather, because if you look at for example, this house, this is the house of the governor, all right? So the ground floor is not the living quarters. The living quarters is on the second floor.
Okay.
In the typical bahay kubo, if you go to native houses, the living quarters is in the second floor because the ground floor is supposed to have a space to protect the people from
Like from animals,
insects, yeah. So what the Spanish did is that they just made use of the empty space in the ground floor. They turned it into a garage or a warehouse for crops, yeah. And then in the second floor, the living quarters, if it was a native Filipino, it's just one common space, and that will be your, you could be your dining, and then but the Spaniards were more particular. They wanted to have a space like for the comedor, the kitchen.
So they divided it.
Yeah, they were what the Spaniards did is just to divide it into rooms.
And what's amazing though is the open is coming back now. Now everybody wants open again.
Yeah, so the large windows are actually more native in origin.
Really?
So native, so there are if you would ask a native like a Manobo from Bukidnon, they don't have a word for a window because the house has to have an open space, so there is no
There's no word for it.
It's an entire yeah.
Wow, but there was no glass. It was just
There was no
open.
glass, just open.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, the Spaniards had to put this is the main window. Then you have the small window, and then there's actually another window on top there. They call it the calado to allow natural light and air. And then when the Americans came, they tried to destroy it and have our own design, and then they realized, oh, this is very, very hot. So we have to.
It was so funny that they had to learn it the hard way. You
Yeah.
know? They can't just say, "Oh, this is good."
And then,
Well, there you have it. Oldest structure still standing. Cagayan de Oro.